Well, welcome. We've made it to the 12th session of Black History Conversations, Season 7. Just absolutely amazing. So I'm Liz Millman from Learning Links International, and my colleague Simon Fringo's with us. He manages all the technical side behind it and also contributes. So thank you so much, Simon, for all that you've done during this last season and the previous 6. So this is a conversation. We've got an interesting group of people with us today, and we're going to be able to find out lots about their different interests, and also we're going to be asking questions of one another, I'm quite sure. We're also going to recognise David Alston's achievement with his book, Slaves and Highlanders, Scottish Book of the Year. Now, I wasn't able to contact David in time to, I only just heard about this yesterday, in time to ask him to join us, but I'm sure he'll join us in the new year. We're also going to hear from Belong Nottingham, just a little bit of an update, Simon, if you don't mind, on your project. Just quite informal, but we'll just see how things are going. So because I'm in Australia, this is the conventional way of starting any meeting here. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm currently living. It's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, their elders past, present and future. This land, which is called Coromandel, or Mount Dandenong, belongs to the sovereign people of the First Nations. It was never ceded. It always was, and it always will be Aboriginal land. There are a lot of good things going on at the moment about recognition of the traditional owners of the continent of Australia, all the different groups all across. So maybe in season 8, we'll be hearing more about that. It's also still within the International Decade for People of African Descent. And I thought in season 8, we ought to take more notice of this and see what different people have been doing, because we've still got a couple of years to go, and really has the United Nations been able to do all it hoped during this international decade. I suspect we might have to have another one, but that was good. At some stage, I might ask if anybody managed to join the Sankova conference, but we'll just stop the sharing there and just say welcome to you all. It's really lovely, and I think it would be really great if you didn't mind introducing yourselves again, and then we can ask one another questions, because you've just all got such interesting backgrounds. So I think, Beverly, I'm going to make a start with you. Then I think Wilton will move to you, just so that you know what order we're doing things in. And then Carol, and then maybe Sylvia. We'll just see how it goes. So Beverly, I'm interested. I've written off to get a copy of your calendar. I don't know when it'll arrive here, but it will at some stage, I'm sure. I'm a bit late ordering it, I'm afraid. So tell us about yourself then, and what about these calendars you've been producing for the last few years?
Okay. Sorry. It's interesting. It started in COVID. I was at a conference, a racial justice conference, and somebody mentioned her son had experienced racism in Newcastle, and did it still exist? And I said, well, yeah, of course, but come and talk to me. So when she came up during COVID, we met in a park, because that's all you could do at that time. And she had this idea. I thought of doing a calendar. Maybe it would help tackle the racism. And it was an idea a few other people had mentioned. I belong to the Northeast of England African Community Association. And I thought, okay, let's go. And I got a few people together, historians, researchers, academics, community activists, equality activists, a few people together. And we just went for it. And we managed to produce this calendar in 3 months towards the end of 2020. As I said, it was sold out. And it was so popular, we had so much information, we then moved on to do a booklet. I think I have 4 copies of the booklet left, so that's almost been sold out. So that was very popular, and again, really interesting. And the calendars, we've kind of worked with historic figures But in the booklet, we were able to introduce current, we felt, oh, we were able to introduce current figures like, Chia Moura and Tony Swadwa and, current people in the Northeast. So we had about maybe 50 people all together. And then we thought, people said, well, why, you must do a 2023 calendar. We really want it. Well, I don't know where those people are. So we did this 2023 calendar. Again, beautifully done. And just things have moved on. We've worked with, as I said, Tyne-Away Arts and Museums. We worked with Historic England and did some school resources with them because they are very, very good to work with, great online. So we've got online school resources using the material in the first calendar. And, that has, the learning stages and questions for school children, that kind of thing, ages 8 to 12 largely. So we did that and then the calendar. And then we thought, well, let's finish with a Newcastle walk. And that's lovely because, again, we've got loads of beautiful pictures, loads of family involvement, beautiful pictures. And again, Historic England's doing it online. And so we've got a sidecar view of walks and tiny bits of information about Newcastle and linked to Google Doc stuff, which gives you more background on the individuals as well as on the place. So the walk is quite concise in that it only gives you snippets of information, largely around the involvement in Newcastle. And the background information on those people and place is linked into a Google Doc. So a lot of work again, very, very interesting. New information. We're working with city guides as well. So we're getting more information on place. So I think it'll be a real good. I mean, the project was meant to be time limited, and we're going to finish in about spring, hopefully. As our, the person who holds the bank, Newcastle Antiquaries, we've used their patience quite a lot. And we thought, okay, it was only meant to be one calendar. 2 years later, we need to wrap up and put everything on a website and say, we've done well. So that's the journey, really. And I'm happy to answer questions on any stage. I am part of a group. I coordinate it. But it is a group effort.
That's fantastic. And I think you do need a group working on these things. You can't just try and do things alone. It's really important. I'm fascinated again, though, because I spoke earlier and said that looking at Black history from a local point of view is really a very, very valuable way of taking things forward. Now, the model that you've used, Beverly, is fascinating. And I think we need to put together some sort of guidance and examples and use your project, the work you've done more recently to get these calendars, do the research to enable you to produce the calendars, create the walk. It's just fabulous, the work you've done. And once this work is done, it can always be added to by others when other things are discovered. But, if you've rigorously looked at that history, I think that's fantastic. And you've looked right back. I was just trying to search through the emails because I included the picture from your calendar in the email, but I can't find it. So, but it is fascinating. If I find it at some stage, we'll just share that with others. But everybody would have seen it when they got the invitation, I suppose. Right. Okay. So that's fascinating. So any other points to ask Beverly at the moment? Okay, let's go on.
Can I just say, in terms of the pictures which you can't see, we went as far back as the first African recorded community is in the Northeast, in Bruff by Sands in Cumbria. So we were able to start with that both in the booklet and in both calendars. And we had a lovely trip up there just recently, December the 2nd, along the Roman wall. And the Bishop of Carlisle consecrated a stone in the grounds to commemorate the first recorded African village in the UK. So all lovely stuff. I mean, the pictures on this calendar, I think Irene Ikodaro, Ira Ulrich, and maybe Connie Abantu. We tried in this our last calendar. It is our last calendar to try and get more women, because one of the problems really, it was a very male community then, and we really wanted to allow everybody to know women were also here contributing. So this time we try to get more women.
All right, so here, can you see the picture now?
Yep.
Yeah, I had the brain looking up at the email you sent me. So who's the gentleman here in the uniform?
He was a captain, a Poma, and he worked for the Black Star Line in Ghana. And we wanted to try, I mean, very much, we have a lot of Sierra Leoneans and Nigerians, and it was very important perhaps to make sure we got that representation from Ghana as well. And, you know, for that page, we've got this person who achieved very, very well in terms of becoming a captain, not just in the Black Star Line, but many others. And of course, the ships there were built in the time. So that's a lovely link. But we've also have on his page the picture of somebody else who died at 22 during World War II, fighting for Britain. So the idea of, you know, that contribution and that loss of life, as well as the achievement in becoming a captain. So in a sense, we wanted to kind of convey that, the complexity and the heterogeneity of the African contribution, that it wasn't just one way. And of course, we've got Ira Allridge, who toured Newcastle and was one of the great playwrights. And in the middle, we've got Ida B. Wells.
Yeah.
This is Ida B. Wells here.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's possibly enough from me if there's no more questions. I don't want to.
All right. Who is the other gentleman who's on the right of the illustration?
It's Ira Allridge.
Oh, sorry. You said, yeah.
Yes.
Right, fantastic. Well, that's really so interesting, and the calendar is available. African Lives in Northern England. So we've got the details here. So if anybody needs to know, then I put the email details in the email. But absolutely fascinating, Beverly. And I think what you're saying, you know, time limited project, excellent. Okay, then now, Wilton, before you have to jump on your plane, I'm going to give you an opportunity, Wilton, to share. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Liz.
Good. Okay, then. So before you set off on your travels to Uganda and Madagascar, you've been talking to us over the last few months about your interest in the existence of Euro-Africans way back, and I feel this kind of links in a way with what Beverly's talking about, but you actually take things a lot further back in your research, don't you?
Okay, so I am managing around 40 DNA kits. And again, for everyone who's probably just seen my bio, I'm a lawyer, I'm a chartered accountant, and I'm qualified in about 6 different countries. And I've been in school a long time, about 9 different universities. But my background is it's legal, it's finance, economics, accountancy, and learning and everything, because my dad is a PhD in theology, divinity. My mom is a teacher, retired teacher, MA in education. So I grew up with no television in the house, something I'm trying to pass on to my kids, but they're resisting. It's so learning, and I mean, I programmed for fun, so I'm a computer IT programmer too. So there are many skill sets that I have. Genealogy is something I came in cold 2 years ago. My family tree, it's well over 510,000 members. I sit on a number of panels. So this, for me, it's exciting and to be a part of these projects, but I am encouraging Jamaicans. I have paid for more than 50 kits with my own money. I manage about 40 kits, and I could see the differences. I have had high school training in biology, and I'm probably teaching myself biochemistry now. But yeah, the mindset is there. I am a quick learn, and some things that just don't stand out and don't make sense. I could see that there's the fallacies which exist and distortions with history. and not enough is being told about it. And I work in a field with finance and economics, and there are filters. There are things that you can say and things that you can't say. What the DNA and my DNA is telling me is that my African E haplo, and it's not in order, the letters that are assigned to DNA groups, E and E1, B, and my group, it's old. It's older than A. A is a branch and offshoot, but the Jews and Jewish faith, and I'm Judeo-Christian, I'm Seventh-day Adventist, and that shapes a bit of my thinking. Yeah, I've grown up in a church, and we subscribe to the Old Testament, New Testament, the chronology of 6,000 years. The Orthodox Jews are very adamant, and they subscribe to that. So I'm with them with that shorter time period. Not the earth itself could be millions of years. And I'm not one of those persons who would dismiss and say, well, they found some mammoth bones. But I put it to them, and even to the smartest people around, how can you truly date matter that God created, a higher being, if it's Allah in the Muslim world or God, Yahweh, or Jehovah God? How can you date it? It's impossible. And when you discover anything in the ground, I'm not an archaeologist, again, I'm not a scientist, but when you discover things in the ground, it's not like they put it in a cookie cutter sandwich bag and they can isolate the matter. It's all bacteria, whatever is there, it's in the ground, and it's a giant washing machine, believing that the flood did happen, BCE 2400. So more than 4,000 years ago, there was a literal flood, and that would have combined whatever was there before when God created the cover of the world. And the Genesis 1, you read into it, you could see that, face of God moved across the deep. It suggests that there was something there. I am not around, and I'm not even going to try to date what was there prior to God's creation. What I am convinced, and being to Orkney, I traveled to Orkney and listened to them talking about the Neolithic people, and they suddenly vanished. And I walked the tiered gardens, and I went to Machu Picchu. I've visited 100 countries, and I've been to Antarctica. I've been to Iceland and Greenland. I've been lots of places, Australia, you name it. I mean, there's 100 countries, but the most exciting place, Easter Island, where the giant muis and those statues, and how were they built and constructed. And so the concept of giants play into it. And I would take that on board rather than aliens. But back to the Black history and culture. I just think that a lot is missing. And the DNA story tells a story that there were people in Europe, in the UK, as far as up to 1600s, when Oliver Cromwell conspired to kill a king. Charles I lost his head, literally. And there was a deportation act. Now, being a lawyer, I've seen this, and I've seen copies of it. So there were deportation acts, and these people who are Black could not return to the UK. And you look at the population explosion that took place in the world from the 1800s. I don't know, but they really multiply, and there were a lot of people having kids, 10. Even my father's from a family of 14. But in the Caribbean, with people around the world, they just suddenly just multiply. I mean, the world's stats would show, and the population stats, that it just grew. But in the UK, my story, and I've done the African DNA, I've done about 8 different tests, including the whole genome. I have done the big Y. And then I listened to the companies tell me, well, sorry, Will, we couldn't give you a big Y700. Certain markers failed in your test. Same thing with my dad. Oh, we will force it through. We could run it again. It'll take you another 6 months, or we could force it through and you will be deprived of the knowledge of processing the extra SNPs. And of course, it made me angry. And as far as we know, we're all health conscious people. We don't smoke, we don't drink. We don't have any genetic problems with our DNA. So when they can't analyze the chromosomes, my dad, he's taken 3 tests, but I've seen where he took the ancestry test, and that's autosomal. So that's only dealing with the part of the DNA that's current for 5 generations. And I've seen where he tested an ancestry this July. July passed this summer, and in the space of just 1 month, 1 month, his father's, because they have an algorithm, because his parents are dead. His dad passed in 69 and his mom died in 83. But they have an algorithm to separate your parents, you know, the ethnicities of your parents. And that's a great thing. My dad is now 77, but he lost 5% of Celtic, of paternal Celtic ethnicity. And I'm scratching my head, how is that? I know that, you know, different people will join these sites, but how can you, as a company, say it's one thing, and in the span of 1 month, you erase it and you're retreating and going back and saying, no, his father's father was not Celtic. He was 100% African now, and that part that was assigned to Celtic is East Africa. And the records don't show that. The records show that my dad has West African blood, but it's mixed. You have some Egyptian, you have Pacific Islander. He's a 20% Celtic blood, but his father, his mother, was 40%, easily would have given it 40% mixed European ancestry. But they do things like that. They erase ethnicities in a short span of time. I could understand if next 5 years they would say, well, based on our current data set, then we adjust the numbers. But one month, these people are criminals. To outright call them criminals. I don't really want to be this aggressive and forceful and judgmental, but they do things like that. And they fail to analyze certain segments of the DNA. And
okay, now, just while you take breath, let's see if there's anything anybody wants to comment on up till now. Beverly, you've looked back into distant history in the northeast of England of the Black presence. Have you got anything that you wanted to explore with Wilton?
It was very interesting. The very first time we went to Brough by Sand, and you may have seen it on television, or Lushoga did a program on it.
Say it again, what's the name of the place?
Brough by Sand.
Right.
It's in Cumbria.
Right, yeah.
And the first recorded African community, because there was a Roman contingent there from Libya,
Right.
Mauritania. And I say recorded because, of course, we don't know what we don't know. And I was talking, we were very much welcomed, and we've been back 3 times, very much welcomed. The very first time I was talking to one of the people there, an older woman who, her family had been there, 4 generations. And I was saying to her, wow, your DNA is really in this place. She says, what? Your DNA is here longer than mine. And I have never forgotten that. Yes. So I think it is a hard one to know for sure. But I think for me, it was very, very important. Perhaps like many of us, I was there on the demonstrations. We are here because you were there. But to know that, in fact, we have always been here. We are part of this country. And we have always contributed to this country. I think that, really important to establish. And of course, people have gone further back than the Romans. But the first recorded African community we have evidence for is there. And for me, that is important.
Definitely, that's interesting to hear and note. I just would like for people to really read, and there's so many sources. Well, you have Miranda Kaufman from Oxford University, and she published her book called The Black Tudors, the Tudor age being around 1480 to about 1610, thereabouts. But I'm thinking to myself, how is it that the big grand Oxford that's been around for 1,000 years, how come they're just finding out, and a professor is saying, well, voila, there's some Black people who are roaming around in Tudor age. But then David McRitchie, he wrote about ancient Britons, and he is dead almost 100 years. I think he died like in the 1930s, but he looked and studied and looked at David McRitchie, his 2-volume, 3-volume set series on the ancient Britons, and described those people as swarthy Black people. There's Tacitus from the Roman Empire. He was born in AD 50, and half his books are missing. And I'm sorry, I hate to sort of get so emotional or so, but how can you, in this day and age, have half of the books missing? So it's like they're telling us, and all the forum that I'm about, well, how do you think that the people were in Europe were Black? Well, if you take away the books from us, And I even found another book on George Washington, Colonel Washington in the US, being one of the, or the first Black president, literally the first Black president, described as a Huguenot. And I tried to get the book. I had to go to Cornell, my old school, and trying to get pages. And the Amazon edition, not in print, not available. So it's not, because I'm not some conspiracy theorist. I consider myself an informed man, one who's always been thirsty for knowledge and information, and can make those connections, simple connections. And they are, you know, and I give you so many stories. Like you had Sinclairs, the Sinclair family. It's so popular. Come on, Sinclairs, St. Clair's, ST, Sinclair, or Sinclairs, SINCLAIR. So with the Sinclair family, they are ours. They are ours. I mean, yes, I mean, they're traditionally they're whites, but the family that came to Jamaica, I took upon myself and I sampled. Yes, I really got involved in my work. I even had licenses to open graves. And that's where I suggested. I made a suggestion on one of the big forums, YFOL. They're the big forum for Y-DNA. After you do family tree DNA, you go into YFOL and you can trace thousands of years back in time on the male. And I suggested to them, maybe it's time for us to open some graves. And I know some of the very important people are buried in churches and sacrilege. Oh no, we can't do that. But they must have a family member. Could have been a brother, a father, but a man who was buried and not so much into the church, but buried somewhere else. And I had a license to open graves. I didn't go with that because that option was $20,000, $30,000. Cheaper option was for me to test a direct descendant, which I did. And I found out that the Sinclair line that went to Jamaica and migrated was not the haplo R. The European haplogroup that they throw in our faces and say, no, you're darky, you're Africa, you may have been here, but it's many thousands of years ago. You're not in a modern age. The R's are supposed to be laying claim to everything. Well, I have a thing about the R's. The Sinclair family in Jamaica, Dan Sinclair was one of the most prominent ones. He died around 1860. So his direct descendant, Trevor, who was in the UK and now back in Jamaica living, I tested him, took his sample, and I ran it in a Polish lab. I'm sure if I sent his sample off to the UK or one of the labs, again, I don't want to denigrate them too much, but if I sent it off there, who knows, it would have turned out to be an R. But the Polish lab ran it, and he is an E. He's an African E. So this is a big family that left Scotland and went to Jamaica. My line of McDonald's, I didn't pick up my name from a slave master. I am one of the only E McDonald's around. There's some R's, but when you run their kits, they don't match with other R's who are white. They're Black people, Black men, but they don't match with other R's. So it shows you that the sampling that they have in the system is very narrow. But those R's that are part of the whole R family, because R's are modern and we in E Africa, way in the back of the bus, they're supposed to match with each other. No, they're supposed to be younger than my haplo. A lot of them are older. It doesn't make sense. How can you have an R, which is a modern haplogroup number type, and it's older than my E? My E is 900 years. So there's so many inconsistencies. And the companies come out and they tell me, no, Wilton, we can't show your family member because it will be distortive. You're an E, an African, so we don't want to show that to you. And I did further testing and I found the connections. That's when I started out and I had some results. It was run. I didn't do the whole genome sequence with the longer STR reads. And I did it, and I connected with the Collins and the other Scottish families, which are also E's. I also found E's, which are McDonald's. So the more I find out in search is that there are things out there, there are literatures out there that's pointing to a presence, Black presence from Adam all the way throughout Egypt. There are brooches, there are pictures, there are plates, there are different little icons that's been found. And I don't know, people either don't look at it, they don't pay attention to it. And it's not just about Africa. West Africa, yes, there's there was a diaspora, but there's also people living in Europe and the UK up to around the 1600s. And what happened to the statues? There's certain relics still around. The London Bridge and certain of the bridges, they're negroid.
Okay. I'm going to say, I'm going to interrupt again now because I have to let you breathe. So I'd like to ask you, could possibly, because some of us may not understand about E's and R's and things, is it possible for our new website for you to write a simple article that just explains a little bit of this? Because that would be really, really helpful. And then as you discover more, I can see the thumbs up, as you discover more, then you'll be able to add to it as we move through, and we can refer people back to reading that so they've got some insight. Yeah, Wilton, thank you so much.
I would be happy to do that. I'll be happy to do that. All I'm saying is that there are two little things that may throw things off from conventional reading. One, the timeline that they are using doesn't accord to my timeline. For me, it's 6,000 years.
But you need, if you can explain this again, because if we go into more detail now, we're going to miss out on others being able to join in the conversation. So thank you so much, Wilton. You're just absolutely amazing. Don't know how you've got where you've got, but it's just fantastic, and you've got such a an interesting breadth of your interest and experience. Okay, now I think it would be lovely, Carol, you've got a very strong connection there, and it's not every week we have someone joining us from Dominica. So Carol, introduce yourself again, please, and then a little bit about Dominica and the Black History links.
Okay, so hi again. I'm Carol Sorrento. I'm a visual artist, and I did live in England until 4 years ago when I moved back to Dominica after the hurricane to be with my mum and also to carry on my research. So basically, I'm a visual artist. My themes, I love looking at entanglement, the fact that we're all entangled, the fact that history is entangled, and it's very difficult to separate things out. So I'm very interested in what Dr. Wilton was saying about DNA, because I've recently had mine. I was convinced to do mine when I was over in England for the World Reimagined earlier this year. And I'm quite aware that they're not very accurate, or there's certain things not being covered. But I was very pleased to find out anyway that my DNA was saying more than 50% African heritage. So I'm really interested in that whole thing about entangled heritage, the fact that I'm British and African and European as well. And so that's the kind of thing I explore in my work. And I use plants as a way of exploring that. So basically, I'm a textile artist. And for me, I use the metaphors of textiles and entanglement and pulling threads as a way of exploring my own history, and also using plants and roots. So part of my research is looking at the origins of plants, especially like hair, the fact that nothing here is indigenous, and a lot of the plants that we assume are part of our culture have been brought in at some point by Europeans. So that's really my interest. So recently, as I said, I was involved with the World Reimagined, commissioned to do one of the globes for the amazing project. I don't know how many of you know about the World Reimagined.
We did talk about it 1 week. One of the colleagues from Black History Network Walks Network, she told us a bit about it, but it would be good to have a review about that.
So basically, it was a project who were looking at transatlantic history in Britain, and artists were given different themes. There were different, like about 7 different themes, and 108 globes created, which went round Britain. And the project is now finished. They're trying to cite all the globes. Like I said, my globe was looking at economic botany, so plants that I thought were quite significant. So I selected 10 plants, that I thought was quite significant in that trade history. So arrowroot, and again looking at kind of indigenous knowledge and the fact that Africans who came to the Caribbean came with their own body of knowledge. They didn't come ignorant. They came with a body of knowledge that has now filtered through into our culture. Dominica is classified as the Nature Isle, and it's a very green, lush place. And but yeah, the fact that a lot of the plants that we know, like the breadfruit, for instance, was brought over by Captain Bligh, that kind of story, and looking at, so it's just, my work is really trying to raise awareness of that kind of thing, doing a lot more research. In Dominica, the beauty about being here is that I can grow my own stuff. I'm very interested in looking at natural dyes and fiber extraction as part of my work, and as part of a heritage, and taking the work really a little bit back to nature. So yeah, I'm always researching. The fact that here in Dominica, there are lots of ruined mill sites, and one particular one I'm interested in is situated on family land, and that's got connections to Scotland through the Sen houses. So, so I've been looking at the archives in Carlisle, and the yeah, there's just that kind of link, heritage link. I haven't actually, my mother's surname is Stevenson, but I haven't actually managed to find the origins of that. My father's surname is Sorrento, which originates near the Pyrenees and the Basque region between France and Spain. And I have a photograph of an African grandmother, which I can't find the roots of. So I'm just interested in that whole fact that that side of my history is kind of lost. It's very difficult to trace the African side, but it's a lot easier to trace the kind of European strands of history. So that's my practice in a nutshell, really. So mostly I'm a painter. I paint and then I explore that history, but more recently I've been doing a lot of textile work, looking at natural dyes, botanical drawing and planting, and that's all part of my practice. I do a lot of reflection on what it means to migrate, the impacts of migration, and that so my practice is quite a reflective one, always thinking. I do a bit of writing as well, a bit of creative writing. So that's
fantastic. Carol, would you like to join us in the new year at some stage, and do you want to do a presentation of your work?
Yeah, that would be good, because I'm a visual artist. Yeah, it would be really good to show some visuals and just see what I do.
Yes, I agree.
Yes, so.
Yeah. And as you see the ideas that we were talking earlier when Jean Samuel joined us briefly, you know, it is important. Creative artists can do such a lot, and in telling the story, and as you say, reflecting. And I think that's really,
yeah, I was very much involved in Bradford, because I lived in Leeds of Bradford, so I know Audrey and Alison very well, and and Joe Williams. So I was very much part of that kind of network in Leeds, and just helping to share the history through arts and creativity in Leeds and Bradford as well.
So Beverly says it'd be lovely to see your work and to see your globe as well. Avril, I think you were coming in.
I was, just to say hi, Carol. I'm from Dominica.
Oh, okay. Hi, Avril.
And my brother is Kelvin Francis. I don't know if you know him. He runs a shop down in Roseau. But yes, he's very well known in the island.
Yes. Oh,
but yeah, I think we've got Sorendos in our families as well. But I'm not too sure how it, it links in. And I did go to see the globes at Trafalgar Square and the Olympic Park. I'll have to, because I took a picture of every single one of them, so I'll probably try and find yours. But they were absolutely fascinating, amazing, and a really good idea. And I want to see it done all over England.
Yeah, yeah, it'd be good. Yeah, it was a great project to be involved in. So I was in 2 places. I was located in Scotland and in Cambridgeshire, and both experiences were so different. But yeah, it was really good to go back and just connect as well, and look at what it means to be British, and just the whole thing about saying I'm going home. What does that mean? And yeah, but I feel a lot more rooted here because of the sunshine, as you can see. It's
Yes,
sunny.
well, you've got Lennox Honeychurch as well, who I also met. I interviewed him.
Yes.
You know, amazing guy,
So,
amazing.
yeah, we'll make contact with you, Avril. That's good to know. Okay.
So lovely. Happy Christmas to you, Beverly. And it's lovely that you joined us, and we'll talk some more in the new year. Merry
Okay,
Christmas.
good to talk.
Lovely. Avril, would you like to share your photographs at some stage of these globes?
Would I like to do what? The photographs?
Share the photograph
Yes,
with us.
I have to sort them out because there's 96 of these globes. I videoed some. I took videos of some and pictures of others. I was a bit disappointed with the actual book that came out to go with the globes because they were they only showed some of them, a small selection. I really felt a bit disappointed because I would have thought those people taking all that time to do all that work, they would have put all of them into a book. You know?
Yeah, interesting, because I've not seen the book. I've ordered it, but I've not seen it yet. So
yeah, I've got a copy at home, and fantastic. But you know, really, they should have put all of the. I mean, I don't know if I don't know why I kept calling her Carol, but don't ask me. But I don't know if your work's in it, but it was definitely a really exciting idea. Very, very emotional to look at the globes, and you know, when they were all in Trafalgar Square, they were laid out right across the square, and I took the pictures intending to do something with them. But yeah, I don't mind sharing them because they are amazing.
That would be lovely. So if we can maybe discuss that on email, because I've got your email, Avril.
Yeah.
That would be really great. And again, that's something, because since Black Lives Matter, since different projects started at that time, it's really good to reflect on them and see what impact they had. And this is a really interesting one. Being away from the UK, I've not heard much about it at all, and feel that I need to do some research, but that would be lovely, Avril. Thank you. Okay, well, Carol, thank you so much, and we look forward to that. I've practically filled up the calendar now.
Okay, welcome. Look forward to it.
It's lovely. And also the history of Dominica, we talked a little bit earlier, so maybe we can pull together something about that, because I think it's useful to, I've got a huge collection of PowerPoints now, because that's an interesting way for teachers, because we're going to set up a new website, talking about it for so long.
I mean, Dominica's an interesting island because it was quite strategic to the British, well, to all the British, French and Spanish, and that's why it's got such a mixed history, because it was just such a very small island, but a lot more, that in terms of its positioning, it was very strategic. So the history is always very surprising, actually. What comes up.
But fascinating, and we're talking in a little while about the links with Scotland and slavery. We've got the special thing I want to recognise. So that would be great, because we often, some of us talk a lot about Jamaica, because I've got links with Jamaica, and Roland's here, and the Windrush Allies Network, but it's it's a bigger thing, and we need to understand about the different Caribbean islands. They've all got very different histories and culture. Thanks very much then indeed, Carol, that was beautiful. So Sylvia, you've been exploring the joy of local history. As you said, travel, so you actually decided to look at where the links were between Enfield and Black history. So tell us about that.
Right. Well, as I said earlier, because of my limitations, I'm very aware of my limitations because I can't get out with chronic fatigue. But I feel it's important that everybody knows what was in local history in the past. And I was on the local history committee many years ago, and there's an image, you know, roses round the door and all of that kind of local history. And I got really fed up with it. And so the point I wanted to make was that, oh, sorry. This is difficult for me. Avril knows that I'm a bit cloudy today. What I was looking for was not only individual stories about people who and what they had and what compensation they received for their possessions, but also to understand the nature of the local society. Because I myself, when I did a master's degree on the local school board, actually imagined that the people that I'd come across in the late 19th century in newspapers were the local gentry. But now I know that they start off back in Tudor times and even medieval times as having a small shop, mainly dealing with fabrics, in the city of London. And if they're successful over years and years and years, they end up being involved in plantations in the Caribbean and in Sri Lanka and in Mauritius, you know, all of these places across the world. And they make a new class of people. So one example I can give you, this was the first person I started off knowing where he lived and that he got compensation. I knew nothing more. And what happens to him is I mean, I haven't got time to tell you the whole story, but he comes into Enfield in 1819, rents the property in the best part of Enfield at 40 Hill. And he actually, then within three years of coming into Enfield, he's a city merchant, he's a West Indian merchant, he actually gets invited onto the vestry. And I don't know how well people know about the vestry, but it was a very early local form of government. And it starts, first of all, by its very name, as being a group of wealthy men, sorry, who looked after the church and made sure the building was good. And then they got given the job of looking after the roads. And then in the 18th century, they get involved in the poor law and setting up workhouses, etc. So, and by 1850s, I can't remember the exact date, but in the 1850s, there's a Local Government Act, and these people then come, these people are still in power, they're still influential, they're members of parliament, they're magistrates. So it's as if these city merchants not only find a place to live where it's clean and decent, you know, it's a good place to live. It's country. Enfield had a population of 8,000 in 1801, and that's man, woman, and child. I mean, it's nothing, is it? It's no ridiculous. That's from the River Lee all the way up to Hadley Woods. It's a big parish, and so I'm really interested in how they get into society. And this is happening around Bristol, it's happening around Liverpool, it's anywhere. And of course, don't think those are the only slave trading ports. Every port that could get a ship in was in the slave trade. So around, just inside these coastal towns, there are big houses being built by prospering people who have got involved in the slave trade. So it's quite an intricate thing going on. Is that enough?
Absolutely fascinating, really fascinating, because looking as you have at who were these people, these
Yes.
merchants, we kind of get the impression, you know, you hear about West Indian traders, but you're talking about a new class of people here who started off and very interested in the fabrics. Fabrics were
Yes.
so important at this stage.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we've just done a project, the Learning Links International. We did a project on Welsh plains, a cloth that was produced in mid Wales, which was
Right.
used for export. And I'm fascinated by the last point you made, and that is that if you look at any port where there were ships, and I looked at Lancaster,
Yes.
and that there are big houses around Lancaster.
Yes.
And I've been struggling to explore my own personal family history links.
Yes.
And we're now at the point of recognizing that there was a good sized mansion called Scale Hall, and some of my mother's family rented that for a time, and it was the time of the trade. So
Yes.
that's really interesting to, you know, realize, because everybody across the UK was involved in some way or another.
Yes.
Each
I always end up not saying the absolute obvious, which is that I want people to understand the very complexity of it. And not only am I going to write, hopefully, about the individuals that I've identified, but I've got another group of people who benefited from the slave trade and the profit within the family, because I'll be able to trace out that how that prosperity, and particularly the people who got compensation because they got such huge sums of money, how those the web of the family all benefited. I mean, sorry to be anecdotal, but Bazalgette, the man who built the sewers to improve Victorian London, his grandfather was a tailor in the south of France, in the mountain area, and he makes a journey to London, and he becomes the Prince of Wales waistcoat maker. He makes his goods, and lo and behold, everybody's going to go to Bazalgette because they all want to be in the pink, so to speak. So he makes a lot of money, and he invests in plantations as well as property and other things. And Bazalgette, the grandson of the original man, he's born in Enfield in Clay Hill, and he doesn't stay very long, but I'm claiming him anyway as a local person. And he got an education and a background to make him an engineer from that prosperity in the family, that they're living in big houses, you know, the descendants. So I mean, that's so complicated, I know, but you can do it on a local scale, can't you?
And the thing is, you can look at it locally, even if it is complex. And particularly, I think in England, I found it easier researching in Wales because it's kind of smaller, and you could work out the relationships between people and property and things. Whereas in England, it's kind of harder. So it's really interesting to have heard about northeastern England, and then what you're doing in Enfield, because you can't look at the whole of London's Black history. It's just too big.
It is.
It needs to be this kind of detail, and then you really, what fascinating stories. I can't wait for you to read more.
I can't wait to have the strength to write them, I can tell you.
Look, Sylvia, you're doing so well, and it's fascinating how different people have come to learn more about Black history when, you know, over this COVID time and other time, you know, these last few years, for whatever reason, I'm sorry to hear of your challenges, and I do understand you when you talk about your fuzziness. It's difficult, but you sound pretty sharp to me, I tell you. That was just brilliant, Sylvia. You'll join us again, will you?
I will. I'm thrilled to bits because I'm very isolated because I don't go out. So I'm thrilled to when Avril told me about you. I didn't realise.
Yeah, it's lovely because it started out of isolation in COVID that we had to find ways
Oh,
to.
I see. Yes.
So, you know, we've been going a bit, but we're always welcoming new folks along. And Sylvia, I'll add you on the list of, you get an automatic invitation.
Yes,
But
thank you.
if for any reason you don't hear, then let me know.
And
Right.
can I say, if I don't turn up, it's because I'm not well. You know what I mean? It's.
Of course, you don't have to turn up
I
every
don't
week.
know when I'm going to be well or when I'm not.
Folks turn up as and when now.
Yeah, thank you.
McCarthy has turned up, so we have to speak to McCarthy next. So others will just have to wait a moment. McCarthy, how are you?
Fine, thanks, Liz. Yourself and everyone else. Hope all is well.
Good,
Yeah.
yes. Folks seem to be okay who joined us today.
Mhm.
McCarthy, I'm feeling a bit more with it now, I have to say. I've found the last
Good.
week's quite challenging. Anyway, we've got there. We're nearly to the wrap up of our season 7. Looking forward to season 8. Now, McCarthy,
Yes.
you've linking us with us from Tanzania.
I am.
Now we're looking at the 2023 program.
Okay.
We need to do something on Rastafari in the UK.
Okay.
And from the point of view of fitting with the story of the Windrush generations. Now, I've talked to you about us applying for funding to do something. We really need to look at that one. I think it's important because this is Emperor Haile Selassie was a very important figure in terms of Black history, and it's really important we recognise his life and times, and we've had different ones look at that and share stories about that and research. But the story about Rastafari in the UK is very important. McCarthy and I did a project together with a wonderful colleague called Haptu Old and also Yasser Safari. Sadly, Hapti's passed, but that story was about the roots and development of Rastafari in the West Midlands, again, a local story. So that was, you know, a valuable thing. So there were areas of the UK where there seemed to be more Rastas. So it might be interesting. Manchester was one, wasn't it, McCarthy? Anyway, tell us what's going on in your world in Tanzania at the moment.
Well, the electric is on. So today, in the past 3 weeks, they've had power outages, what we used to call power cuts back in the day in England. You know, those who are old enough to remember those.
Yes.
Those glorious days. Yeah. Power cuts. So we've had power outages almost every day. I think yesterday was the first day that there wasn't one, and so far, so good. It's on at the moment, so I hope they've sorted out the power. You know, I mean, they're saying it was because of a lack of rainfall. It wasn't, you know, there wasn't enough water to do whatever they need to do with it. So that was the situation here. Yeah, we're just glad to get some electric, basically.
That's it. I don't know if you know, McCarthy, but back in the UK, there's a real struggle on
Yes, I know.
power sources. I was talking to my cousin earlier and she was saying, you know, she hadn't even got the heating on in her house because she didn't want to use up too much gas.
I know.
Really... Dear me, the world has changed, hasn't it, since we started talking about Black History conversations and we discovered what COVID was all about. Now, Wilton is being very industrious and he's putting in all sorts of information onto the chat. I'm copying all this information. Excuse me, McCarthy. I'm copying all this information, Wilton, and I'm putting it onto the PowerPoint so I don't lose it, because that's a bit of a challenge sometimes. So thank you very much indeed for contributing all of that. Anyway, McCarthy, so you're also going to do us a little bit more, tell us a little bit more about your Left Behind Us project, where you've been working with your family, and you're going to write that up as an article, I think.
Yeah.
Do you
In
want
the
to just
process.
tell people what you did? Because I don't think anybody who's on the screen was actually at your little presentation.
Okay, no problem. The back end of May or June, I think it was. I interviewed 13 of my family members, brothers, sisters, cousins, nephews, those that were born in Jamaica and were left behind, as it were, when their parents came over to England. So I interviewed them, and I found certain themes, common themes amongst them, such as what one of my brothers called the lucky ones. They said they were the lucky ones. The lucky ones were basically those who were left with family members or guardians who were good to them, right? Looked after them well. Then you got the unlucky ones who, the other side of the coin, ended up with family members, guardians, you know, friends who were not good to them, right? So we had that contrast. Also, another area was what I call the School of Hard Knocks, where they described how they were brought up, what Jamaicans call brought up, see, right? And basically, what it was that as children, they had certain duties that they had to do before going to school, such as traveling maybe 4 or 5 miles to get water, looking after the animals, feeding them, tending to them, getting wood for the fire, making the fire, and then having something to eat, get themselves ready and off to school, which is usually like, well, in my family's case was like a 5 miles walk to school and 5 miles back home. So they had to do all that before going to school. They had to arrive at school neat and tidy, right? But they were also taught to wash, cook, iron, sew, etc., etc. So I call that the School of Hard Knocks, because they all related how hard it was. So that was another area, and I've got some other areas. Jamaican born versus English born. Because what happened is that when the families came over, the parents came over, they then had children in England. So they had basically a Jamaican family and an English family. And then when the families came over, they melded or whatever the word is, right? And so therefore, we've got the contrast between those who were brought up in Jamaica and without their parents at some stage, and then those who were born in England and had their parents all the way through their lives, right? And that within the families, you have different connotations. Like my elder sisters, they termed it as, they termed the being brought up in Jamaica, hard knock life, like slavery. And when they came over, they basically brought me and my sisters up. Right, so they would cook and do all the things, and then they showed us how to do it also. So interviewing my relatives, it was a common theme that the gender split, that those from Jamaica, the females, when they came over, basically they brought up or looked after their younger siblings. So there's a contrast within the family between those born in Jamaica, those born in England, and how they were brought up in the different roles that they took when they came. I've got other areas, forgiveness, gratitude, and I'm thinking off the top of my head, forgiveness, gratitude, and other areas that are, trauma is another one that comes out of it. So I delivered part 1, and I'm yet to deliver part 2, which I hopefully do in the new season. And
okay, well, great, McCarthy. Thank you so much.
So you don't want me to read 2 verses out of this rhyme?
Yes, go on. We're going to have some
Okay.
poetry this evening, won't we? Well, it's my evening, I tell you. Well, it
Okay.
isn't early
Yeah,
hours
yeah.
of the morning. Yes. Off you go,
Yeah.
McCarthy. McCarthy is a
Okay,
well-known
it
Jamaican
call-
poet.
They
Off you
call
go.
it bad. So I've got 2 verses out of it. So here goes. All the way from Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, Makapi Selassie presents It Bad. It bad, man. It terrible, man. What the British government do to Windrush generation? It bad, man. It terrible, man. What the British government do to Windrush generation? I know business, I have to make a statement. From I people come to England is a hostile environment. Because back in the Caribbean islands, ones were told that the streets of England paved with gold. But when they reach, lo and behold, they buck up racism, discrimination, and the freezing cold. And the way that them treat I and I is like them not have a soul. Them not have a soul. Them not have a soul. It bad, man. It terrible, man. What the British government do to Windrush generation. It bad, man. It terrible, man. What the British government do to Windrush generation. A long time now, them are disrespect. Because after for them so-called World War II, England was one big bomb peck. So them go to the Caribbean and call upon them liar British subjects to come work, good wages can collect, and a better standard of living them a go get. When them reach, and not like that, what them did expect. Them find themselves in such a situation where man and woman who did have them good education, pass matriculation and get them qualification, and I work as lawyer, doctor, tailor, nurse, dressmaker, businessman and businesswoman, end up at the factory work, bus conductor, work on railway, or as garbage man in England, Wales, and Scotland. It bad, man. It terrible, man. What the British government do, the Windrush generation, it bad, man. It terrible, man. What the British government do, the Windrush generation. You know how much this earth, after 40 years in the country, go to school, college, and work, if you find out, say them burn the paperwork, and then you have to find your own paperwork to prove that you have a right to be here. Status gone. Job gone, access to the NHS gone, and some got detention center and them fly them gone to a land them never even know have been to since the day that them born. And that's as far as I got, Liz. It bad.
Wow.
Oh, fantastic. That's
Absolutely
just so
amazing.
great. Wow. So with the poem, are you just saying that's as far as you're going to read for us, or are you
That's as
still?
far as, well, I think I just need to finish off that last verse. And yeah, of course, and then that'll be it. I think, yeah.
Wow, just amazing, just amazing. Roland has put a little note up, and this is a dreadful photograph, but it's not clear. But here he is, the well-known poet Makapi Selassie. Okay, we need to have a better photograph of you, Makapi, but brilliant that we've got that imagery there. Okay. So that is fantastic. So Roland, I think that poem, we need to record that poem, McCarpy. This is my suggestion, that poem is recorded as part of another project we're doing, and illustrated somehow. So we need to have some illustrations of the Windrush generations to go behind that poem, if you think that's possible or appropriate. Then it would be really valuable, because then Roland, you'd be able to have that story which so clearly encapsulates the challenges that so many people have faced. So thank you very much indeed, McCarpy. Thank you. Big hug
Thank
from
you
us
so much.
comes in here. Okay. Good, good. So, Roland, we've not let you get a word in edgeways so far, so over to you, and then we've just got a few things to catch up with on my big PowerPoint. Okay then, Roland, are you there? Good, good. Can you hear me, Roland?
Good afternoon to everyone. I was just typing up. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you, Roland. You're joining us from the north of England
Yeah, I
somewhere.
was just literally putting. Yeah. Live in Twickenham, but I'm up in Leeds at the moment. I
All
was
right.
just typing something up in the chat for a copy. Very
Okay.
good poem, a copy. My kind of style.
Yeah,
Thank you.
lovely.
He's wonderful. Isn't he? So good. Right, Roland, I'm just going to ask you to comment in a moment. At 5 o'clock the other morning, I woke up and joined in with a conversation that you had.
For an event, Windrush event. Back I'm doing hosting a couple of them.
Yeah, and we were speaking with the representative from the Welsh government. The Windrush Allies Network have been working so industriously as volunteer ambassadors for Windrush generation claimants. And Roland is from, my brain's gone, Roland, what's it called? Justice for Windrush Generations, your wonderful organisation. So,
Windrush generation.
Yeah, I could try and find the website to show people. Just a minute, let me just this for Windrush Generations pops up here. The joys of sharing information around the world. All right, Roland. So this is the website that you've got with your colleagues. Justice for Windrush Generations. Do you know anyone who's been affected by the British Home Office hostile environment, also called the Windrush scandal? Because the British Home Office is now paying compensation to people from countries that were part of the British Commonwealth who were wrongly treated. Now, Garrick, Roland, you and your colleagues, Garrick and I think June Elizabeth joins on the Windrush Compensation Scheme Sunday chat. So if any of you know anybody who could possibly be eligible for compensation for treatment by the British government, the group meet on the second and last Sunday each month at 2 p.m. UK time, but exceptionally there will be an informal Boxing Day Windrush discussion. We never stop. So well done, Garrick. So we can see I put that on the site for you. So hopefully people can check into that. And then underneath is the Zoom link. So the website you're looking for is Justice for Windrush Generations.com, is it? I can't see on my screen. Sorry, let me just move this out of the way.
.org.
Justice for Windrush Generations.co.uk. And McCarthy, one of the things that and Roland and the others have talked about is the fact that we need to refer to this as the Windrush Generations.
.co.uk. Sorry. Yeah.
.co.uk. Okay, over to you again then, Roland. Anything else? All right. Roland.
Yeah, just that I would like to invite. Yes, I'm doing liking to
Yeah.
do quite a number of events coming up in the new year. One is the Lobby of Parliament on the 18th of January, and we hope the event, the United Nations will be there as one. A rep from the United Nations will be there as one of the main guest speakers, so to speak. And then we're gonna have the Windrush engagement, Windrush Valentine community engagement, which is on the 13th of February. So that's more a social event for advocates and victims, so to speak. So, but I will speak with you on my copy. If you touch base with me, I've dropped my email address in there, and I've also dropped in my WhatsApp number. So if you touch base with me, and we'll have a discussion on that, McCarthy, please. Yeah.
Okay, McCarthy, does that make
I'll
sense?
hand back to you.
Yes,
I'll
most
leave
definitely.
you.
I'll get in contact. Sorry, I'll get in contact with you, Roland.
That would be very valuable. And Carol's
All
also
right, respect, brother. Respect.
put a note in the lost me power of speech. Put in the chat that you can get an idea of Carol's work by watching this on YouTube, survivingstorms.com. Okay, Nature of Ruins, Carol Sahindo, and Creative Repair. Fantastic. Carol, you need to be over here. We've survived a storm 18 months ago that flattened 25,000 gum trees in the area in which I live and flattened our house as well. We're living in a rental at the moment, so this is why it looks a bit sort of scatty behind me, all sorts of bits and pieces. But
Sorry
yeah,
to hear that, yeah.
Yeah, so I know you have storms too, and gosh, things change with the weather. Right, I'm just going to, if it's okay with you, because we've taken over our time, and we thank Simon very much indeed for letting us keep on going. Right, I'm just going to whiz through what we did in season 7. Okay, I was quite amazed by this. So we started off with Sir Jeff Palmer, who's done such sterling work up in Scotland, but in Edinburgh and other places to raise the profile about Black history, and the Edinburgh Council's report that came through. If I'm not too articulate, I'd just like to point out that it's 1:30 in the morning here, so I'm getting a bit tired. And the Windrush Allies Network also shared the information at the end of September about a really fantastic series of sessions that we've been doing, looking at the trauma of the Windrush generations. It was a training to try and see if we could help in some way to explore the trauma that has been suffered by people from many countries across the world who've now clashed with the UK's Home Office under the hostile environment and subsequently. So that was a really important catch-up session. Then Black History Month started, and we carried on looking at the Windrush Allies Network project. Then come Simon Fringo, who's with us every session we're ever on, runs it. But Simon also works for Belong Nottingham. Simon, do you want to say anything about the Jacob Wainwright project, about how you're getting on?
Still ongoing. I think the main update is actually that we've mapped out a trial Black History walk around Nottingham, which we're going to try and walk tomorrow. So.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be many people because of the weather, but myself and Chris Weir, who's one of our steering committee members, a retired archivist from Nottinghamshire Archives, and hopefully Albert, one of our volunteers, who we want to be the leader in future of these Black History walks.
Yeah.
We'll hopefully have a walk around the city, and my daughter, poor thing, long suffering, will have to follow us.
Good. Right. Well, it will be lovely in the next season to hear more about that Black History Walk, because this is quite a theme. We often have Marcia Dunkley join us from Black Heritage Walks Network, the Black Heritage Walks Network. They work from Birmingham. Excellent. Thanks ever so much, Simon. That's great. Then we looked at Welsh wool and slavery, but from a different perspective than the project that I've talked about in the past, which was called From Sheep to Sugar. This time, it's a Cardiff University project, and they engaged with art students from Coleg Menai in Bangor, North Wales, and it was really brilliant to have younger students join us to tell us about the research that they'd been doing and show us how they'd illustrated the stories. Then we had a session following on the sort of projects theme for Black History Month about the Penance Project, where two organisations that I'm much involved in, Learning Links International and North Wales Jamaica Society, we're linked with this small community in Wales, in Jamaica, which has very strong links with Wales because the Pennant family were the plantation owners. So we're now working on a reparation project with colleagues, but we are struggling with that. But anyway, we'll set up again in the new year and we will succeed. A very interesting research going on there. So that was good. Then we had a session in the beginning of November because in Australia, we've had this TV series called The Stuff the British Stole. Well, it's been absolutely fantastic. And I'm looking forward to when it's shown on British TV or is available. But there is also a series of podcasts. So if you look up The Stuff the British Stole podcast, you can probably find your way through it. Then we carried on to talk about how are the stories of Black history being told. And then we had author Velma Kleinmont with her talking about her fantastic book, Little River, which I've yet to read, but it's about the history of Jamaica right the way through, written in a mix of fact and imagination to bring it to life. Then, as we said, the Left Behinders were talked about, had followed up the research that Makapi Selassie had done with his own family, because I think it's often useful to look really close, and that was really a really good session. Thank you, Makapi. Then Bunmi Orisan, Nigerian author and founder of the Sankova Pan-African series, which is just so many sessions that she's done and posted on that website, Sankova Pan-African the Sankova Pan-African series. And the particular episode we were intrigued by was why are Africans mourning Queen Elizabeth II? So we talked quite a bit about that. So last week we had a live link from Cape Town with two colleagues talking about the research that they're doing, Christine and a colleague. So it's really brilliant that we were able to join them. And then I'll write up this session as a conversation. Now we've got all these 12 spaces in season 8, so we're looking for getting people signed up against those. Now, in terms of Black History conversations, we also look at Black History books, and usually June Elizabeth's here to share some of the books that she's read and recommends. But we're going to do a weekly review in next season, getting organised. But this session, I especially just want to recognise David Alston. Now, David was a founder of Black History Conversations. He hasn't joined us that much lately because he's been so very busy. He was researching, and he's got a fantastic website, which I think I've got down here. This is his website, Slaves and Highlanders. So you might be interested in that, Carol. And he's got loads of information on the website. And having started that as a website, he then went on to publish Slaves and Highlanders and spoke on one of our sessions, can't remember when it was, earlier in the year, about this publication. Well, it's now been recognised as Scottish Book of the Year 2022. So there he is with his plaque as a gift he's been presented with there. So that's absolutely excellent, and it's a well-researched book that explores the prominent role of Highland Scots in the exploitation of enslaved Africans and their descendants in the cotton, sugar and coffee plantations of the 18th and 19th century. So paying attention to the new colonies of the Southern Caribbean, including Grenada, Guyana and Suriname, in the years to 1863, This book contributes to the debate on reparation by reappraising the idea of Scots complicity in the slave trade. And the foreword is by Rod Westmass and Janita Cox. Janita joins us often. They're the co-founders of Guyana Speaks. So Dave shows that Scots were involved in every stage of the slave trade, from capturing slave ships to auctioning captured Africans in the colonies and hunting down those who escaped from bondage. So it focuses on the Scottish Highlanders who engaged in or benefited from these crimes against humanity in the Caribbean islands and Guyana, but some reluctantly, but many with enthusiasm and without remorse. Their voices are clearly heard in the archives, while in the same sources, their victims' stories are silenced, reduced to numbers and listed as property. But David does give voice not only to these Scots, but to the enslaved Africans and their descendants, and those who reclaim their freedom, to free women of colour, to the Black Caribs of St. Vincent, to house servants, to children of mixed race who found themselves in the increasingly racist society of Britain in the mid-1800s. So absolutely fantastic book, really, really good read. And you can get a special deal on buying the book at the moment. So if you look that up, it's, as I say, Slaves and Highlanders, and it's produced by the Edinburgh University Press. So David's also involved in a reparation project, something to do with the Dick bequest. So we need to follow that up at some stage. Right, so in 2023, the Edinburgh University Press are also going to produce a publication on Frederick Douglass in Britain and Ireland. I particularly picked this out because we have struggled a bit finding the stories of Black history in Ireland. We've only ever done one session on that. Now, Black History Heroes, and she's not here. This is supposed to be a big surprise for June Elizabeth, the international Windrush advocate. And we want to be able to tell the stories of Black heroes. So we're going to do a PowerPoint to tell a little bit of June Elizabeth's story. We're also working on a PowerPoint about the story of Jeff Palmer as well. So the Black History Conversations Creative Arts Awards go to Michele Jean Samuel, who joined us briefly earlier, and he's going to join us in the next season to tell us more about his artwork. He started in season 1 as our artist in residence. And at that stage, we also had a poet in residence. We had Yasser Safari joined all the sessions in season 1. And McCarthy, I think you better take the mantle on now. And now a new project called Honesty in History. And Honesty in History is about exploring local links with the slave trade and colonialisation. So it's just been really brilliant to hear about the different things, and Sylvia, to hear about your Enfield projects. Now, wait for this one. It's a good idea. I'm a Rotarian. I personally am a member of Rotary International and have travelled around the world meeting up with other Rotarians and other local groups. Well, anyway, the idea is that we encourage Rotary clubs to see if any members are interested to start an initiative called Honesty in History, to bring Rotary clubs on board in exploring the Black history stories in their areas. So can you imagine what could happen in Enfield if you could talk to the Rotary Club? But I think there's oh, this is Wilton's information. So that's an idea in progress at the moment. Carol, I suppose you have Rotarians in Dominica, don't you?
We have, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's just an idea, but our Penance project is supported by Maypen Rotary, and they really have been very good. And we've now linked them with Denby Rotary Club in North Wales, because the Denby plantation in Jamaica was owned by a North Wales family, the Pennants, and they're going to do a joint history project across. So I'm really keen on getting people who might not think they're the sort of people that need to know about Black history or are interested to know Black history, to make sure that we engage with other organisations. So that was my bit wrapping up. So I'm afraid that's taken a little bit longer, but lovely. So we've got Carol's website here. That's lovely. I'll just copy that onto the PowerPoint, and then we'll finish off what we're doing then, Simon, I think. And thank you all very much for contributing for what's been a really, really lovely conversation this evening. And for those of us who, Sylvia's gone now, but it's really lovely for those of us who feel a bit out of things to join up together. So Carol, thank you very much. Avril, thank you. Roland, thank you very much. And Wilton and McCarthy, thank you. And the biggest thank you I have to give to Simon, who has persevered now through 7 seasons. So we're thinking of doing this season, the sessions in the new year slightly earlier. We're talking about either 12 o'clock or 12:30, whatever will fit in best. So we'll be asking people over the next few weeks. But anyway, have a great time over Christmas time. I don't know what you're doing, Carol, in Dominica.
Yes, we haven't planned yet, but we will be doing something, I'm sure.
We're trying to do things in Australia as well. So it was twilight markets tonight. It was. Okay, Wilton, good. You going to add anything?
Okay.
Okay then. So if you wrap up the recording, Simon, thank you so